Carrier aviation is incredibly complex. The navigation to find ships at sea is bad enough, but you also have to take waves and air gusts into consideration. Furthermore, you need to adjust your speed to land or take off without waves dropping you into the sea. This complexity is why the Japanese were so thorough in training their pilots. For graduates of the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy, there was a probationary period where they would serve as midshipmen. This would last a year before they were commissioned as ensigns. Once commissioned, ensigns would be selected after an aptitude test at Kasumigara Airfield that lasted 3 weeks. They would then receive a month of training in a 2-seater aircraft with their instructor. The first solo flight would take place after 13 hours of dual flight time. This was called the Pilot Trainee Program, or Soju Renshusei. They called it Soren for short, and it lasted for about a year after their probation. After passing their first solo flight, they would proceed to more advanced training for several months. The whole course took 9 months. After completion, they would be assigned specific aircraft based on their performance and skill sets. They were fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, land-based bombers, or seaplanes. They would then be sent to various air groups depending on their role. By the time an officer pilot was ready for combat, he was a lieutenant junior grade. In November of 1934, a parallel program was created, a reserve student program for university students and graduates. To distinguish between the officer trainees and the NCO and enlisted trainees, the officers were called flight students. The NCOs and enlisted men were flight trainees. In 1928, it was decided that a civilian training program should be created to expand the number of pilots they could field. It was called the Flight Reserve Trainee Program, or Hikoyoka Renshusei. This was shortened to Yokoren. The first class began training in June of 1930, and it drew from 15 to 17-year-old male civilians. They would first have to complete a competitive written exam. The best students would move on to the next stage. Selected candidates would receive 3 years of basic education, along with learning various naval skills. The flight trainee program lasted about 7 months, 2 months on their primary trainer aircraft, the Yokosuka K2Y biplane, then 5 months on their intermediate trainer aircraft, the Yokosuka K5Y biplane. Once the introductory courses were completed, they would be sent to various air groups for specialized training. This training was standardized and it lasted 5 to 6 months. Most Japanese naval pilots were assigned to air bases on land and operated land-based aircraft, but the cream of the crop were the pilots assigned to the aircraft carriers. Initially, only flight students made it to carriers, but in 1938, these strict standards were loosened to meet the demand for more carrier-based aviators. Training would begin on a land airfield within a restricted area, marked by white canvas markers. These markings represented the flight decks of aircraft carriers. Next was the approach. They would practice go-arounds or aborted landings without touching the decks. Once they'd mastered that, they would practice touch-and-go landings. They would land on the runways and take off again without coming to a complete stop. Finally, they would practice landing on carriers with arresting gear. By 1941, Japan had 1,500 pilots in their navy. It represented a small but elite force. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And have a nice day.